You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And as always, here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strongest group and closest partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashaiman University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on MTN to join. Duraplus, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duraplus goes, water definitely flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fie. Rehoboth Social Housing, your housing dreams become reality. My guest this morning, Professor Kwesi Enin, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Professor Kwadwo Appiah-Tua, Associate Professor, School of Law, University of Ghana, Legon. Dr. Theo Echampong, he's political risk analyst. And for the second segment of our discussion, we have on the state of the nation, we have Dr. Stephen Amwa, who is MP in Shaiso, financial economist and member Finance Committee of Parliament. Of course, his status appears to be changing, so he's Deputy Minister Designate for the Ministry of Trade. Samuel Neti George is MP, Ningo Pram, Deputy Ranking Member Communications Committee of Parliament and Member Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. Of course, we shall also be joined by Mary Awalana Ada, who is Programs Manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for making time to join us. Good morning to you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great,
Sir.
Great. So let me begin by taking you to the Ashaiman community that was visited by the soldiers, and that is the reason we are having right. So we woke up to the news that a young soldier known to play the trumpet so very well, 21-year-old Sheriff Imoro, had come from his station to Accra for a training and sought permission to visit his mother in the Ashaiman community. It was during that visit that he met his untimely death. Then the community was greeted by military personnel who were on rampage on Tuesday, March 7, with helicopters and armored vehicles. Civilians were brutalized. This, by our count, circumstances of military brutality that we have been able to count, this will be the 10th in less than 3 years. Professor Kwesi Enin, Professor Kwadwo Appiah-Tua, let's start with you, Professor Appiah-Tua. I'm sure you have read the military's response. What would you say?
Samson, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I feel outraged. I feel dismayed. I feel so disappointed about what has taken place in Ghana, in 21st century Ghana, 2023, after 30 years of return to constitutional rule, where the rule of law is supposed to work and for people to be considered as citizens, not spectators, in the own words of our president. What happened really takes us years back, generations back. And it's a sore reminder of our past. Some of us who experienced a little bit of military rule and the fact that there was lawlessness and disorderliness. I think that is what happened at Ashaiman. And it violates every law in the books. The Constitution is clear about how citizens should be treated. The fact that we have a whole chapter in the Constitution on human rights, and for the dignity of human beings to be degraded to that level is appalling. It's just condemnable in the strongest terms. And it is the wish of every well-meaning Ghanaian that action should be taken to make sure that this matter is not pushed under the carpet, but the people involved are duly sanctioned and punished.
To be frank with you, when I saw those footages and pictures, I doubted that this was Ghana.
Yes.
I doubted that this was Ghana, where in your constitution, you put there in Article 15 that the dignity of all persons shall be inviolable. No person shall, whether or not he is arrested, emphasis, whether or not he is arrested, restricted, or detained, be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, or any other condition that detracts or is likely to detract from his dignity and worth as a human being. How does this coexist with what we have just witnessed in the country?
Well, the two can never go together. The rule is that the Constitution, as you rightly said, the dignity of the human person is supposed to be protected. The same Constitution talks about the fact that everybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty. What took place was an extrajudicial act aimed at brutalizing innocent people. It was claimed to be an intelligence-led operation, but it was not. The police had a role to play. The police started something. The army came and usurped that responsibility placed on the police. And the police went mum, which is also very shocking and frightening if the police cannot protect us. And so in this situation, we see where rule of law has been shoved aside. It's not only the Constitution that we can refer to. Ghana is a state party to the Convention Against Torture, Cruel and other forms of degrading treatment and punishment. Ghana is a state party to that. We've had a special rapporteur visiting the country, visiting our prisons, to look at how the country's laws respect torture and how torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment is actually respected in the country. And the report was not very good. And so this is going to add to the stock of our record. And it's just not the right way to go.
The question again, looking at the Constitution, about all Ghanaians or all persons being equal before the law. The law says that even, and I'm quoting, where a person is charged with a criminal offense, he shall be presumed to be innocent until he is proved or has pleaded guilty. You may have all these beautiful things in your constitution and your jurisprudence, which in the law courts, it is better that 100 guilty persons should escape than that one innocent person should suffer. But in a situation where, in the face of these same laws, that says you don't have the right to take another person's life, if people take the life of another person, will this not be justified? Some have justified this.
It cannot be justified because we have laws that regulate such matters. What we are seeing on your screen, it reminds us about slavery. It reminds us about how our ancestors were lined up, packed like sardines, whipped, beaten, and taken across the Atlantic to the Caribbean and to the New World. What we are experiencing is a violation of the Constitution because the Constitution talks about the fact that apart from being presumed innocent, even where such matters are to be resolved, Article 12.1 says that the responsibility is placed on the executive, the judiciary, the legislature, and other organs of the state to respect the constitutional provisions on rights. So when you look at the way the whole operation went about, and the defense minister says that it was sanctioned from above by the military high command, and the military high command is under the control and direction of the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, who is the president of the republic, then it looks like we are applying the law in a way that favors the people in uniform, as has also been confirmed by the Minister of Defense, that we should respect people in uniform. And then another commentary is that we need to be disciplined. And so what they did is to discipline us. But that is not the way the law works. It is the work of the police. Just yesterday, I read on your portal that the police have made some arrests. And there was a previous information that some investigations were being conducted by the police. This is how the law is supposed to work. And so if somebody, the killing of that young man, unfortunately, is a very sad story. And incidentally, I have a nephew who is a very close friend of this young man who passed away. And before all this mayhem would be unleashed on the people, we were all expressing our regrets and even to our young boy. So it is not that people want to overlook what happened, but the law must be made to work. People are presumed innocent. So if you conduct a swoop and you arrest 184 or more people, and then you beat them up, not only the torture they suffered at Ashaiman, but also at where they were taken to, some were even made to lap like dogs and so on, and then left almost naked to return home without a word of even apology from the military high command, shows how degraded the whole armed forces has been reduced to for what they did. And so we need to let the law work and make sure that due punishment is meted out so that there will be order in the society. People will not be afraid of the police. I want to refer you to a case decided by Justice Akabuafu, in which he made a point clear that the people in uniform should not be made to do things according to their own way. And this is the case of Republic versus Chief Superintendent Lydia Y. Donko and DSP E. ex parte Mohammed S. Okaija. It's a 2016 case. And he said, I think that as a country with a history of abuse of constitutional rights of citizens by persons in uniform who loved to, quote, show citizens where power lies, unquote, at this time of our democratic dispensation, the police are expected to comply with the law, especially the Constitution, in the discharge of their duties. So this is a case where a soldier has been allowed to run on a rampage and destroy properties. And the police could not arrest him because he's a person in uniform. So the need for the police to also do their work is very critical, so that they by now these people should have been arrested and dealt with, or at least the police should make the attempt for us to know that if they are not successful, then there are some big powers behind them, and we'll be able to identify where to pinpoint the blame and to demand accountability.
Right. I'll return to you shortly to find out what ought to be done now and immediately. There are those who have raised the questions that the president, who is the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, has been terribly disappointing, that he had not a single word for this in his State of the Nation address. And since then, he has said absolutely nothing. Not even to start with, express, grief with the family that has lost their young boy, and to talk about what the army have done. There are those who say that in any civilized country, in any country worthy of the name a democracy, by now, many heads would have rolled and the soldiers involved would have been standing, going through a process by now. Professor Kwesi Enin, do I have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Right. So, Prof, I remember when Major Mahama was murdered. I had you on this show, and my production had to help take off some footage, on the screens, because I just couldn't help it. I just couldn't hold my tears back when we're talking about him at the time. I have to do this job, but I can assure you that as I look at these pictures, it just doesn't help me. I wish that we would not be playing them back. What's going through your mind as you saw these pictures and you continue to see them this morning on this television?
There was a sense of shock, of sadness, and a sense of failure. Failure not in the context of that we could not prevent it, but failure in the sense that all the hard work that has been done to try to build a society in which those in service understand their role for what it is. That when we use taxpayers' money to train you, to feed you, to educate you, arm you, that your role is to serve. But service also has a synergistic relationship, that those who are served accept that service and in return have a dialogic, consensual, respectful, collaborative relationship. And my dismay at the failure is that after almost 20 years or so of hard work seeking to build and improve civil-military relations, I think you've cited 10 cases, that we don't seem to be learning any lessons at all. And the failure is not only from the military side. The failure is also from the civil or civilian oversight side. And I want particularly here, and I think my brother Etua has taken us, through the history, the rule of law side. But I think we need to understand that what also took place is part of that long cultural, historical struggle within the army itself to move away from the Bomkutuku mentality. We've always applied the Bomkutuku, and this I'm borrowing from Raymond Atumuba, culture that says, I'm not going to argue with you. I'll give you a couple of very dirty slaps, and that will change you. So if we do a discourse analysis of what we heard in the film, Monsieur Nyansa, I will teach you sense, so that next time you will behave differently. Now, when someone says, Monsieur Nyansa, learn to be either wise, intelligent, or behave in a particular way, whilst that same person is flouting your rights, then it creates a particular type of danger, because it tells you the way that threats are constructed and how enemies are imagined and reimagined. So, Monsieur Nyansa is a phrase used by probably somebody who doesn't even know what instructions he has been given, apart from go to Ashaiman, arrest some people, blah, blah, blah. The other point I want to raise is the excessive inflation in the use of the word or the words intelligence-led. When we say something is intelligence-led, then it is sharp, pinpointed, specific, and deliberate. So an intelligence-led operation that seizes 184 people, brutalized, and if you see the picture of those guys lying in mud, and there's a particular way in which during war you treat people in ways that dehumanizes and takes away their sense of self-respect and humanity. So when you let them, yes, this particular picture, when you let them wade in mud, excuse my language, like pigs, what you do is that you seek to dehumanize those that you are brutalizing and teaching sense to, so that you create societies of fear and societies of abuse, where that abuse is respected and accepted as the norm. So there's a historicity to this. But Samson, part of my pain and this abiding sense of failure also relates to the discursive language used by our political class. So the Parliamentary Committee on Defense and Interior sympathizes not with the family, but with the Ghana Armed Forces as an institution for losing one of their personnel. That is okay. But then the Parliamentary Committee then says, look, we need to be careful about how we handle this case so we don't worsen it. That is not the way oversight must be done. Oversight, and particularly parliamentary oversight, dealing with interior, defense, and intelligence, is about ensuring that the public faith in these institutions are kept.
Yeah. Prof, you are referring to a committee that spoke to the nation through its chairperson.
Yeah.
And who said they had to be careful not to say things that will inflame passions or suggest that they are supporting one side against the other.
Yeah. But that's not how...
Does that chairperson command the credibility to be making those statements? And have you followed him after he made those statements of caution? What else he has said on TV and radio?
No, Samson, I've been chasing Al-Qaeda as it comes down south. So for the past couple of weeks, that is what I've been doing.
I don't think you should take him seriously, with the greatest of respect.
No, we should, because that statement will be looked at by the International Parliamentary Union, and they will say, oh dear,
But Prof, this is a man who sits on television.
Yes.
And over the Ejura shootings, where the military once again were faulted for killing, he sits on radio and TV and says that a journalist should be beaten. And he had said this before. This is not his first time. He says that if I were the president, I'll grab this journalist and beat the hell out of him. This is the man that is worthy of chairing such a sensitive committee in Parliament and leading them to talk at this time, and you want me to take him serious?
Because the rest of the world is looking at the position that he occupies. And the rest of the world is saying, okay, this is how Ghana wants to do oversight. This is how, under Ghana's democratic dispensation, respect for human rights and the rule of law must be contextualized. So irrespective of what we think within the Ghanaian domestic space, this is a reputational issue for this country. So that when citizens are brutalized, when citizens live in societies of fear because the institution that is supposed to protect them become instruments of threat, then those who ought to play that oversight role and don't seem to want to do so because it's not a time to make utterances that may inflame passions. The rest of the world then says, hang on, what is happening here? So what has taken...
Prof, sorry, but this small bit, and because you are putting such, such leverage, or I don't know how else to describe it, on what such a person says, but the whole world also knows that this same person has called for arms, has asked one tribe to hit the other, and has actually been prosecuted by this state for those, very, very reckless comments. So why should that person be the one to lead a parliamentary committee to say anything for anyone to take them serious?
Well, Samson, unfortunately, the Republic of Ghana and the party that he represents thinks this person is the most competent. But I think we need to move from the person and say, how must parliamentary oversight be done? Because there are other people who also sit on this same committee who are loudly silent from the other side. You see, so what I'm saying is that there's a general failure of Parliament to be seen to be playing its oversight role and assuaging the fears of the people of this republic. And
Prof, what can Parliament do where many say the Commander-in-Chief has failed, completely failed? In less than 3 years, 10 accounts of the military storming and brutalizing innocent citizens because someone's phone is lost.
Yeah, quite it. But Samson, there's even a more disturbing thing that we've swept under the carpet. The military invasion of Parliament prior to the last inauguration of the president. Now, so there's a much bigger issue that we are looking at. What role must the army play in a democracy? And how can the oversight institutions play the role that serves as a check, monitors how they work, and how the institutions, the council, blah, 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 how do they work to ensure that there's a collaborative relationship that inures to the benefit of the people? But Samson, my last point. When an institution says we are using an intelligence-led operation to flush out those who have threatened and murdered a young official, and taking into consideration where we are located, the increasingly downward movement of terrorist groups, and knowing that in Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, Chad, that the spread of extremist violence is directly and positively correlated to how statutory security forces treat their citizens, then I think the Ghana Armed Forces did not do.
Prof, there are those who say, and I'm already getting comments, people asking me, how can a lawyer be asking whether what is happening is justified? My job here is not to tell you that I'm a lawyer. My job here is to play the devil's advocate. So when I ask Professor Appiagyei that can this be justified, that's not my opinion, it's a question. Because there's a section of the public there that are being told by respected people, including ex-military or security officers, that this is justified. In fact, they are saying that Ashaiman we are playing the ostrich because it's quote unquote a den of criminals. And therefore, if the military has to use this kind of approach to weaken them, to beat them down, we should support it.
I think there is exception to my dear friend, Dr. Norman. There is nowhere in this world where the military should routinely go out there and teach people a lesson. So if I had gone to Ashaiman with my students to say, how do we better understand hybrid forms of security provision and how communities that live on the fringes of society seek to provide themselves with some security, my students and I would have been caught in this brutality. And therein lies the danger when people say, oh, the routine use of violence to intimidate and to sow fear is legitimate. It can never be legitimized, because I know myself that were something to happen, I can tell you something. I will receive a couple of very dirty slaps. And as an old man, I cannot run very far. So I know my life will be at risk. And that's why it's crucial and important that the rule of law and the respect for human rights must always be at the center of these conversations and the way that we behave as people serving the Republic of Ghana. But
Prof,
you see, if Al-Qaeda came to Ashaiman now, or Islamic State, and said, look, we want to recruit, what do you think would happen? And I think some heads must roll, because the brutalities that we've seen has heightened the vulnerabilities that we already face. And I'm hoping
which are these heads that must roll?
I mean, when somebody says that the military high command sanctioned it, so who in the high command planned this intervention? And what were the rules of engagement? Were the rules of engagement in such a manner that you go out there and use violence to seek to get the information? Because if the Ghana Police Service has been able to get access to the information that is needed without this undue brutality, then we need to raise and ask some really very...
Head that must roll. We all know in decent communities, many resignations would have been flying already. Where this is not happening, whose job is it to ensure that whose head, is rolling?
Well, Samson, you know that in this country, I remember His Excellency the President as candidate, Akufo-Addo, always used to say, the buck stops with the president. So certainly, as Commander-in-Chief, he must be asking, what are the risk and threat assessments that were made prior to this intelligence-led operation? In terms of how the operation was carried out, what can be the unintended fallouts for the wider security of Ghana. And I can say very confident, sitting where I am sitting, that the unintended fallout is very negative. Because if you listen to the discourse, if you talk to people, if you put your ears to the ground, people are frustrated, people are angry, people want to...
Prof, you keep using the expression intelligence operation.
Yeah.
Intelligence operation. And earlier you have suggested there's nothing intelligent about the operation. Because as we understand from the residents, they just were going around, they were not actually sure where exactly they were going, and they were picking people from various points and taking them to one point, asking them to, as it were, get on the floor, do press-ups, roll over in the mud, and we have seen all the bruises all over the people. An intelligence operation picks up as many as 184 suspects.
Yeah.
And in the end, all of them released. Should you continue to use the expression intelligence operation?
Oh, that is their word or their physiology. But the way we are describing it means that they've got to come back to us with maturity, with humility, and then say, we got it wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. The continued insistence that this was an operation, intelligence-led operation, makes that physiology laughable. And I think it puts us in a very tight spot. I think there are several cases where operations do go wrong. Okay? And I think there have been some intimations that, yes, the operation did not pan out as had been planned. So we should take the next step and begin the process of reconciliation, of rebuilding bridges, and of asking ourselves some very fundamental questions. How do we create trust in this very crucial institution that we still do need?
We were informed, and the police have now confirmed that they have arrested key suspects in the murder of Imoro Sharif, and that it took them a week of sustained intelligence-led operation to arrest the suspects they say are involved in the murder. We are told that this was already known at the time the military went to do what they did. What do you know, sir?
Well, I think the key question now is about the sequencing of how this information is being fed to the public in trickles. And therein lies the mistrust, therein lies the public's concern as to where lies the truth. And I think it is crucial that the institutions involved themselves, come clean and say something went wrong.
Initially, the suggestion was that, and this will be my final question before I go to Professor PJ. The suggestion was that there is general mistrust in the police, in the police's competence to fish out those who committed this very dastardly act. And the belief is that if the military went in there, they will be successful. Of course, by the police's statement, this kind of projection has been defeated. But is that the case?
Well, months ago, the Inspector General of Police spoke about historical perceptions about the police. And I think if the police have gone in, put them, and used sustained intelligence-led operations over the span of 1 week without brutalizing anyone, then I think they have done well. And I think it shows in sharp relief the lack of coordination, the lack of trust, the lack of sharing of information amongst statutory security institutions.
Prof, will it be a question of lack of sharing of information, or that the military simply needed to do this at all costs, whether or not they were aware that somebody had been picked up?
Samson, at all costs, and to what end? The military is not an island unto itself. The military has been established to protect the sanctity of the state.
Yes, but you dare not touch any member, any person in uniform. That's the point they are showing you.
Oh yes, that is the point they intend to show. And I think we do agree that every life is sacrosanct, and that somebody being in uniform must under no conditions make that person more susceptible to violence. That is not acceptable. But the military itself must accept that the rationale for the establishment of military repelling external threats is beginning to change. That now the threat is from within, increasingly. And that these types of actions from Ejura, Wa, and all the 10 cases is creating an understanding or a perception that the realization that the threat is also domestic, and therefore the way we treat citizens is crucial and critical to not exacerbating the frustrations of citizens that can lead to recruitment and radicalization. Probably is not well understood. They must understand it, that actions have consequences, and that we cannot have a combination of both the external and the internal conflating to create insecurities for the general population.
Right. Let me go to Professor Piaget now. Professor Piaget, immediate actions, what exactly should be happening? I understand, I don't know what connection you may have with the group of lawyers. I know that a group of lawyers have been assembled by Oliver Bakavomawo, and they are in the town. They are in Ashaiman, in the communities. They have been speaking with the victims. They have been taking down their details and trying to produce what they say is a report that may not be only for the purposes of taking action here to also seek compensation for the people, but that may go beyond the borders of Ghana. I understand these lawyers are just volunteering. There's no financial incentive for it. They are going around speaking to the people and getting their harrowing stories. Beyond that sort of process, the condemnation by Shraj is very shocked at this. What should happen?
Thank you. Yeah, I think what we are trying to do on the ground is very important. That is to get the information that will be used as evidence. And one information I got is that almost every house was touched because information filtered around that the soldiers were in the community and people were advised not to step out. And so message moved from one place to the other. Those who were caught were those who couldn't get the news. And therefore the soldiers had to enter into houses, break down doors, and drag people out of their homes.
And they blocked the roads.
Sorry?
They blocked the roads.
Yes, they blocked the roads and to ensure that they round up people with the help of the helicopters providing some information to the soldiers on the ground. So this is a typical conflict zone situation that was witnessed. And so information is being collected to be able to know the extent of damage done, not only to people's dignity and to their health and livelihood, but also to property itself. And so that is, some work is being done in that regard. And there's also an attempt to get the Ghana Psychological Association to provide counseling for the victims. And we are making some progress in that direction as well. As to what to do with the information, I think, of course, we have to look at internally as well as externally. Internally, SHRAJ is one place to go. Of course, with SHRAJ, we have to actually make a complaint, a petition, before we can take up the matter. So we appreciate the fact that this time they've come out to condemn the act, which is what a body like a National Human Rights Institution is supposed to do. And so SHRAJ is one place to go. Of course, the courts are also available. And we also want to go to Parliament and make sure that Parliament, the Committee on Security and Interior, Defense and Interior will also do more than what they have said they were going to do. We think that they should have already been there on the ground to gather the information and to talk to people. But the information we are getting is that probably they want things to calm down a bit first. But they are not the perpetrators. They rather want to be on the side of the people. And so there shouldn't be any fear for them going to the ground now. Externally, one sure place to go to look up to is to make a case to use the special procedures available under the UN Human Rights System. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, there's a procedure system. And then the ECOWAS Court of Justice is also there. With that, you don't need to exhaust local remedies. You can take your case to them at any time. Because we want to be sure that we know, as Professor Enin said, who gave the order, who sat down and designed the rules of engagement.
But why do you want to embarrass the nation this further at official, courtesies internationally? Why do you want to do this?
It is not about embarrassing the nation. It is about putting things right, because Ghana is a state party to a number of human rights treaties, including the one on Convention Against Torture. And as a party, a state party, you are supposed to make periodic state reports. And so in the next 2 years or 3 years, when Ghana's next report is due, it is supposed to comment on this, supposed to talk about this in the state report. So if, so far, looking at the information that we are getting and looking at the posture of government, we don't see a situation where the government has even rendered an apology. Any form of supposed apology is only unfortunate and face-saving and, in fact, irresponsible and insensitive to the plight of the people who have been on the other end of the brutality. So we think that that will also put a sense of responsibility in the government to take things very seriously.
How bad is it that the president has said nothing about this so far? And the defense minister, deputy defense, we have heard counter, statements. One comes to say, we will not apologize for this. The defense minister says these things should be expected. Some of these things should be expected. What do you say?
I think that it casts a very bad image on Ghana's reputation as a democracy. And so definitely in our next state report, whether by U.S. State Department or which of Freedom House and so on, Ghana's rating is going to go down because of this brutality which has been meted out to the citizens. And the buck stops with the president. He's the commander-in-chief. And he himself has said it before, that in such situations, that is what should happen. And your slides talk about how there's been a pattern of brutality. And what is very important to note is that in this case, in the Wa case, to some extent to the Jura case and so on, the soldiers may have gone on a frolic of their own, but this one was a so-called intelligence-led operation orchestrated by the military high command. And whether it went haywire or not, which I don't believe that was the case, something has gone wrong and somebody should own up. And so far, nobody has owned up, and the president should do so. So not saying anything at all is very, very unfortunate.
Prof, I'll make this confession to you. In the course of the week since this happened, I've had numerous calls from respected statesmen and women. I've had calls from even outside of this country. And among the impression is that if the right thing is not done by the leadership, it is the Ghanaian citizen, civil society, and respected voices like yours and Professor Kwesi Enin to blame, because you seem to treat this, and the media more particularly, you seem to treat this as another normal occurrence. That's why you have had as many as 10 recorded in less than 3 years under the watch of a human rights lawyer as president.
That's right. That is why, for example, we are looking at going external as well, because we want to make sure that the image of Ghana is protected and held intact. And we also want to make sure that these brutalities are not normalized. They are not accepted as a rule. I've also received a number of messages that say that I'm on the wrong side of the fence and that the people need to be treated the way they have been treated. Again, this idea of Ashaiman being a den of thieves and criminals is portrayed that we need to put sense into them. The police are ineffective, incompetent, corrupt. Therefore, the army should do the job for them. And my response is, hello, aren't we living in a democratic dispensation? The soldiers, there's what we call accountability. And the soldiers are supposed to be accountable to a civilian authority. And the civilian authority is the commander-in-chief. And he should make sure that by this time there would have been some dismissals, and if people would not resign, there would have been some dismissals. He would have at least made a statement.
The thing that has been sanctioned by the High Command, who is doing what dismissals?
Of course, there is a commander-in-chief, because if they would talk to him that maybe they said it was an intelligence-led operation, but it has proven that it wasn't an intelligence-led operation. It was a swoop, and which led to many innocent people, almost everybody who was arrested. And what did they find? Some slabs of cocaine and so on. That is not what they were going to look for. So the government, the president should own up, and he should dissociate himself from the statement made by the Minister of Defense and the Deputy Minister to say that, no, this is not how this process should have gone. This is not how the operation should have been orchestrated. So you are suspended, you are dismissed. There are rules, there are tribunals under the Security and Intelligence Act, the Armed Forces Act, the Police Service Act. There are rules there. The Constitution tells about the responsibilities of the police. And that should also be one place to look at, the checking of responsibility on the part of the police for not coming out and taking any action to ensure that these soldiers are also dealt with according to the criminal laws of the country. It's something that also needs to be looked at.
Prof, just 30 seconds before I let you go. There's been this thing about, they said they are rounding up the people, they are taking them to one place, and then they were handing them over to the military police. And some have said, well, the military police, that is a rightful process to deal with. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, the military police is supposed to coordinate the activities, because if any made that point, coordination is lacking. The military police can take up certain responsibilities that the Ghana Police Service is supposed to do, but they coordinate. They are supposed to share intelligence, and they're supposed to determine where the military police comes in, and then where the Ghana Police Service also does their job.
When a civilian does something against a uniformed person, the military police can arrest them and deal with them.
There is to an extent to which they can do, because even ordinary citizens like you and myself can cause arrest where there is reasonable suspicion or the person is caught in the act. But unfortunately, this is what we see with the swoop that took place.
I asked that question because I'm aware of situations where civilians are arrested and put in cells in the military police?
Yeah, so the function of the military police is mainly to deal with, usually with incidents involving the military, where military personnel are involved. But in the end, they work together with the Ghana police. And secondly, when the Ghana police seems to be overwhelmed or need extra support, they also turn to the military police to help.
So that, do I have and I need one clear answer, straight answer to this. Are you telling Ghanaians that if you offend a military officer or you offend a relation, someone whose relative is a military man, military police can come pick you up and take you to their cells and deal with you?
No.
But that is happening in this country. That is happening in this country.
Yeah, of course, that is what is happening, and that is what we are condemning. That is not how it works at all. Yes.
Okay.
That coordination should be there with Ghana Police.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Now, let me get your brief comments, my guests in the studio, before we take a break and return to look at the state of the nation. So I'll begin with you, Sam George.
Well, something, very good morning to you and very good morning to our viewers. And permit me to say a belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
My condolences go to the family of the slain 22-year-old soldier, Imoro. Loss of life of any man or woman who has taken an oath to serve his country in any capacity is most unacceptable. In fact, the unfortunate loss of any Ghanaian life is most unfortunate. But in this instance, given the manner in which his life was taken, I share my condolences with the family. And you just need to see the reaction of his mother and how broken she is, and the problems that is going to bring to that family. To know that your son, especially in the manner in which he was killed, in the area where he grew up, is most unfortunate. That said, to whom much is given, much is expected. There's a reason why we're being asked to respect the men and women in uniform. It's because they have a certain training that we, for quotes, want of a better phrase, bloody civilians don't have. They have a certain training that puts a certain burden of responsibility on them. We have seen too many reckless actions. And something, I have always held the view that the penchant of using our military as the first course of resort in interfacing with civilian populations is a recipe for disaster. Our military is absolutely not trained. We have some of the finest military officers in the world. Take it from me. And I've seen Ghanaian troops across the world. I had the opportunity of visiting Lebanon and went on a personal private visit to our troops there. And you just need to hear the praises on Ghanaian troops in Lebanon. We have very professional officers. However, that professional training does not extend to engagement with civilian population. The police is trained for that. The police is trained in crowd control, civilian control. The military is trained in suppression. And that is why every time we have seen the military, be it in Ejura, be it during the 2020 elections in Techiman, or in Odododio Ablekuma Central, or be it in Wa or in Boku, it has always had disastrous consequences with the loss of life. The military is simply not trained for that. We should stop putting the military in the forefront. And for me,
obviously, unlike the police or military, the police, they are trained to, if they have to arrest a suspect, they are trained to read to them their rights.
Absolutely.
And tell you that you are being arrested because you have done so and so. You have a right to remain silent, otherwise anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. And also to tell you that you have a right to call a lawyer of your choice to assist you. Yeah. The military, nobody teaches them this.
Absolutely, they are not trained for this. And
because that's not their purpose.
That's not their purpose. The military's purpose is not to engage in I mean, a lot of respect for my learned senior Professor Enin, who I must state was a great resource for me in my dissertation that I did in my studies. But I mean, like you rightly put, there was nothing intelligent about what happened in Ashaiman. The military has military intelligence, which is a wing that is versed and trained in gathering intelligence. I want to understand how intelligence gathering or an intelligence-led operation would involve lashing 184 men and asking elderly women to lie in pools of water, picking bottles and fetching water from gutters, dirty water from gutters, and giving to Ghanaian citizens whose taxpayers was used to fuel the armored personnel carriers and helicopters. How is that intelligence-led? Our military has goofed. I have great respect for the military, but the military high commander sanctioned this.
There are those who say there's a lot of indiscipline in this country. A generation that doesn't know how to respect elders and things. So you need some of these things once in a while to put the fear of God in people.
Well, given the asymmetric nature of national security, which Professor Christine spoke about again, and the threat of terror, what you're actually doing is beginning to build a cadre that is going to get angry, a cadre of young people that's going to get angry at our military. And if you're not careful, you're going to begin to see a lot of young people take up the law to take on the military. And so what the military is actually doing is actually going to exacerbate the problem.
So what should happen?
What should happen is, first and foremost, we must see discipline from within the military itself. This must be a watershed moment for us as a country, especially because the military high command takes responsibility for this. We must see the commander-in-chief himself take front and center role in this matter and demand answers of his military high command, the rank and file of the military that sanctioned this operation. This is a democracy. We cannot continue to have this. And I'm saying, look, it could have been me. Tulaku is a part of Ashaiman I use every day when going to my constituency, because Michelle Camp is the boundary of my constituency, and most of these officers were from Michelle Camp. So I could have been caught in that fire. Any of your reporters could have been going there to cover an early morning story. I mean, this could happen to anybody. And for someone who was in Ayaso West Wagon, I know what this can do to you. I know how it's the slightest thing that would lead to loss of life. So this is unacceptable, and we must condemn it in no uncertain terms.
Okay. Thank you. Can we hear, is Steve ready so we can hear him briefly? In the meantime, let me share just a few comments with you. And this is from Kofi Bento. He says, the army has embarrassed Ghana too many times by these lawless acts, from invading parliament, Ejura, Ayawaso, etc., etc. Our politicians are proving incapable of exercising authority over them. That spells doom. There are nations without armies which are doing very well. It is not impossible for Ghana. There are some very prosperous nations like Costa Rica which do not keep an army. If this continues, we have to start thinking of disbanding them and working towards an ECOWAS force to fight terror or insurgents. Frank Anderson says, let's call this what it is. Persistent military thuggery backed by the commander-in-chief. These crimes include Ejura Techiman and so on. A serving British military officer was in 2003 killed on the streets of London, right next to a military barracks. We didn't see any officers launch any of such primitive acts or, frankly, military hooliganism. Unsurprisingly, the president hasn't condemned any of these or fired any head. No matter how long it takes for a change of government, these people must be brought to book. Let's stop saying this nonsense. The first basic training military officers are giving is not to harm any civilian, regardless of the provocation. These kinds of comments encourage unlawful acts against civilians. Read this one and we hear from Stephen. If you criticized Oliver Barker-Vormawor for the comments for which he is being prosecuted, Remember, he's being prosecuted for Facebook coup. And you are here defending the military who actually took the law into their own hands and forcibly usurped the power and authority of the Ghana police conferred by the Constitution, then you are a hypocrite. Yes, Stephen.
Okay, Samson. Sorry, thank you very much. My regards to our viewers and listeners this very morning. I think the most important factor to me this morning is to make sure that the victims, both the army officer who was killed and those who also suffered brutalities and their families are well consoled. And I want to join all those who are putting up these positions of empathy. I want to be with them to console the victims and also to say that I think the right and the appropriate and effective investigation be conducted so that what is required by law will actually be implemented or pursued.
Investigations conducted by who?
Samson, you know, I'm not a lawyer. But
No, you just said investigation should be conducted.
What I'm saying is that the right investigation should be conducted. Who is supposed to do it or not? Because I'm not into those areas. I don't want to display my ego trips. But I think whoever is in the right position to ensure and conduct that thing, it has to be done.
Investigate what?
Whatever happened, you know what has happened.
Okay.
We need further info. People are giving different pieces of information, whether what they are saying is true or not. It should really be done in a way that we will not form wrong opinions. It will be bad. But I think the most important thing is how can psychologically the victims, especially the Ashaiman victims, and then the family of the army officer who was killed, can be managed so that they can really be in the right frame, right mind frame to go about their daily duties, and the right punishment, if they should, be also executed in a way that will serve as deterrent. But something, what I also want to say is that probably I'm struggling because I don't want to display my ego trips. I'm not an expert in some of these things, and even when it comes to the law. But what I can also say is that for about 40 years up to now, if we be honest with ourselves, these things have been happening, unfortunately. That you realize that, army guys went to this community, assaulted or tortured the people there because one army officer had been dealt with in a bad way. It's been happening all the time. I think sometimes we have excepts of these things in the developed economies, but not in this magnitude. That when you see that, maybe this young person, and you see footages, all these things must be condemned.
In the developed countries.
Yeah, sometimes you see this in US and other places. UK that one person or just a few of them and the police, and you see them. Even if you Google now, you see some of them. They are all wrong. We need to condemn them. I don't think it is right.
But in the circumstances that any such thing happens, you follow what happens after that happens?
Oh, of course. You see the right decisions are taken. They just take them, I'm sure, out of investigation and know who and what went wrong. And that's why I'm calling for investigations. And one thing I also want to say is that we need to be we need to be careful we don't politicize this by our comments. All of us as a country. This is a very...
I'm not sure on this platform anybody has done so.
I'm not talking about platform.
Okay.
I'm even surprised you're also doing this. We are all talking to the entire country. It's a very unfortunate situation.
How can it be politicized?
I'm saying we shouldn't.
No, I'm asking you, how can it be politicized?
By our comments. When
How?
it happens,
How?
Something, when it happens like this.
That the president is the commander-in-chief at this time,
are you limiting
and that he has failed.
I haven't said that.
Something like that. I just want to have an idea what you mean by politicization.
Politicization, when these things happen, we live in this country. By experience of what we see, people politicize it. Probably some people think they want to make political capital out of that. People sometimes make statements.
So have you heard somebody politicize this so far?
No, can I have something?
I want an idea.
So when I end, then you ask me. Because it's like you're interrogating me. Let me finish. At least give me the freedom to also make my statement.
Well, you were just to make a brief comment on this. This is not what you are here to discuss.
Can I finish, please?
Okay.
I think you also accord me the needed space to do that. What I'm trying to say is that it is a fact that in times such as this, people do politicize it. So I'm advising against possible politicization, which of course, unless you tell me you're not in this country.
I haven't heard anybody politicize. That's why I'm asking
said somebody has done.
Okay.
Do we have to hear before we talk about it, or we say something that can prevent possible whatever comments? 2, we also have to make sure that as a country, we need to find a very permanent, perpetual solution to this unfortunate thing that has happened. These brutalities and the assault. I remember.
What's your prescription? Finding a permanent, perpetual solution.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming. When our late Army officer Muhammad died, such an unfortunate issue. Look at how the communities were also tortured by the army. It's wrong, because there are a lot of innocent people in Ashaiman who have been included. Probably even all those who suffered, none of them played any role in this. That's what I'm saying. So as a country, it keeps on happening. It's reoccurring. What can we do going forward that these things will never happen again? That's all that I can say.
Okay.
And I also think all the security agencies should, and those whose jurisdiction also play a critical role in some of these things, come together, review all these incidents or events, unfortunate events that has happened for people to suffer, and come out with a framework that going forward, we can mitigate the impact of some of these things, because it's very unfortunate that happened in Ashaiman. That's all that I can say.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got some of your messages, but I'll share them right after this break.